It's my great pleasure, again, to introduce another fine speaker, distinguished gentleman, whom I just met today. I spoke with Joe a couple of times, but I just met him for the first time today, and I'm looking forward, as I'm sure all of you are too, to his presentation, and he's going to be sharing some interesting insights with you, and I'm sure you're going to find them of value. So, a little about Joe Abegg. Joe is a colonel. He's in the Civil Air Patrol. He's also the executive director of the Association of the U.S. Air Force, and many other distinguishing factors as well. He's going to talk about his background, and I'm sure you're all going to be very interested in hearing it. And so, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Colonel Joe Abegg. Joe? You have the
clicker?
Clicker, there it is. Okay.
Wow, thank you everybody. This is very intimidating because I feel like I'm the slacker of the presentations today. With the incredible things I heard today. So, and I want to thank everybody for putting this together. Very interesting. But I want to start off changing gears a little bit right off the bat. I grew up about 6 hours south of Chicago in rural Illinois, and I had two nicknames growing up when I was a small child, and they were both appropriate. One was Bullhead, because I was very bullheaded. And I realized that, you know, at 3 and 4 years old, but the other one was Eagle Eye, and my dad, because I would spot stuff that people would never see, they would walk by. And I remember finding arrowheads and jewelry that somebody lost, and I would just say, I'm like, to the adults, like, you just walked by that, you didn't see it. My latest arrowhead that I just found in North Carolina, while I was on a layover with my company, airline, I just walking out to a new area that was there, building apartment buildings, and there was some excavation and some erosion, and there was an arrowhead up like 15 feet, and I spotted it amongst 1,000 rocks. Now I have over 200 arrowheads, so I've been looking for little things, attention to details. The reason I'm bringing this up is there's a lot that goes on in the world, in the galaxy, I guess, and the universe, that you need to have your eyes open to see what's really going on out there. So one of my little things is collecting arrowheads, and been doing it all my life. A little bit about myself that's applicable to what we've been doing here today, and I forced myself to write a complete script because I don't want to forget any details that I might skip over while I'm being nervous and talking to a bunch of people I've never met. Just the applicable items, my bachelor's degree was in aerospace engineering. I'm a former Air Force command pilot, a Civil Air Patrol command pilot. I'm an airline captain, been an airline pilot starting with Pan Am back in '87 and 2 other airlines since then. I've operated classified missions on 5 continents, and I have over 29,000 flying hours. I can't do the math how many weeks that would you're equivalent to airborne. So, a lot of experience with air and space kind of stuff. And today what I'm going to talk about is I've had 5 kind of sightings in my life that I can't explain, identify. They exceed my level of physics and knowledge and reality, and they're just totally unexplainable. The first one, if we go I got this. Hope I'm going to get the right one. The first one is, excuse my poor graphics, and I didn't make this until just about a month ago, and it was always difficult to describe it. But around 1972 in Southern Illinois, incidentally about less than an hour drive away from Cape Girardeau, Missouri, near the 37th parallel, if anybody tracks that too. My older brother and I and a friend were outside in the dark in a very large open area. I'm not sure what we were doing. But anyway, the friend kind of pointed up in the air and goes, jokingly said, "Oh, look, there's a UFO." And we all looked up there, and our friend didn't pay much attention to it besides looking, oh, there's a UFO. And I remember that image to this day, almost 40 years later. And, you know, the object may not be showing up perfectly, but this is pretty much exactly what we saw. And in my poor knowledge of aviation at that time, and lack of physical knowledge, I didn't really pick up on the fact that there was a lot of things really strange about this object. This object was a large object, egg-shaped, and outlined in a continuous white light, and had what appeared to be a light on the nose that seemed like it might have been shining forward. And this object would have been very large. And the object moved completely silent and moved from our right to our left, and it was about 30 degrees above the horizon. So at the time, and if you've ever seen a Goodyear blimp or some other dirigible, at first blush you'd think, oh, that's probably what it was, a Goodyear blimp, except for the noise. If anybody's seen the Goodyear blimp, you can hear it from like 4 miles away, because those big radial engines, they have no mufflers like most general aviation airplanes, and you can hear them for miles. This thing was completely silent, dead quiet. And as it moved across the night sky, the stars behind it disappeared, so it wasn't some kind of weird thing. But the fact that the light around it was continuous, not 800 little lights, but continuous. But I'll just read my script here. And also, dirigibles or blimps, incidentally, the reason they call them blimps is because you can take your finger up to the fabric and hit it, and it would make blimp noise. Anyway, you'll be able to sleep tonight knowing that useless information. But most of the dirigibles, they primarily have like a gondola or where people live, or on the bottom. It's mostly for the center of gravity, so the thing doesn't flip upside down. But this thing had nothing like that, and it had the light just like that sticking out the front. And any kind of boat, ship, train, some of the early cars, and all airplanes, they have what they call navigation lights, or position lights. And on the right wing, or the right side of the vehicle, the right side of the ship, there's a green light. On the left side of all those, there's a red light. And the reason for that is because at night, you can look at those two lights and you see there's a vehicle out there, and you can tell by which side has the green light is, which side it's on, and that tells you whether the thing's aiming at you or aiming away from you. So that's been I don't know how many, maybe over a century, that's been the rule of thumb. And there's actually old cars where there's actually a green light on the right side of the car and red light on the left, very rare, but they followed that same thing. If you look on ships and boats, you'll see a little bitty light up there so you can tell the navigation light. Well, this thing didn't have anything like that, didn't have a red flashing beacon light, didn't have strobe lights. It was just that. So the object disappeared over on the tree line, and so about 10 minutes later, while we're standing in the same spot, the earth started like shaking, and then we could hear this very loud rumbling noise, and we all like looked up in the sky, and part of this completely dead quiet. And then we saw this same egg-shaped object, but now it was moving in the opposite direction, but it was moving 3 or 4 times the speed going in that opposite direction. And just about the time it disappeared over the tree line in the distance, we saw what was making the rumbling noise. And what appeared to be, and excuse my graphics, what appeared to be 4 fighter-type aircraft, and I assume there were probably F-100s, we called them lead sleds, in a diamond formation at probably about 300 feet, and probably at full thrust or with afterburner, seemingly in hot pursuit of that object we just saw that already cleared across the horizon. And FYI, fighter jets do not travel that low, that fast, unless they're over a military low-level route, visual flight rules or instrument flight rules, or if they're on a mission over a classified country and then you have all their lights turned off, or if they're doing an air show. So this would be highly irregular, and like all those pilots, and there was a city just to the north, they would have all been grounded for doing something like this. So they're coming over very low, over a populated area, and in hot pursuit, and because it was just like thundering. Like if you've been to a military air show and saw the Thunderbirds or Blue Angels go by, that's what it was. That was like, because it actually felt like the earth was shaking when these 4 airplanes, and they had the normal textbook white lights, green lights, and red lights, and red strobe lights or beacons, like the airplane should have, but they were in hot pursuit, and they went and followed this vehicle, unidentified vehicle, until they were out of sight, and that's all we saw of it. And I was too young and stupid at the time, and the internet wasn't invented, so I wasn't able to track or look at the newspaper, see if anything was reported. So and basically with all that, I assumed that object was approximately moving at 300 or 500 miles per hour, and once again, also making absolutely no noise, and no dirigibles that in known technology can go a tenth that speed because of the drag on them, and they would have to have rockets on them to go that fast if they were made today. And of course, you would hear that from tens or hundreds of miles away. That's the first thing I saw. The second one, this one was around 1978. I'm a budding aerospace engineer in St. Louis University. I'm at home, out walking the dog in a fishing park, probably hundreds of yards from the nearest light or street light. The sun had just gone down. The sky is this beautiful light blue color. It's going to be getting dark pretty soon. And then I'm out walking the dog, and I see an object that looked very much like that, moving from horizon to horizon, maybe 60, 80 degrees from the horizon going up, and just moving about that fast across the sky. And once again, no sound, absolutely quiet, and it wasn't changing size. It didn't appear to be going up or coming down. And I've had the strange honor, because I spent a lot of time in the air, I've seen 3 meteorites enter the atmosphere during the daylight. And when you see those, they're the ones that I've seen, the meteor, there have to be a large meteorite for you to be able to see it in the daytime. And you can see the flashes, rapid flashes of blue and green, like plasma light. It's the most beautiful versions of blue and green that you can imagine. And plasma ones is when atoms, they lose their electrons because there's so much energy, heat on the particle that it just gives off a brilliant light. And this thing was just like this, didn't change at all, just from one horizon across. And once again, there was no sonic booms, there was no sound at all, just very quiet. It's hard to tell what altitude and what size this was, because just like when you see something at night, you have no depth perception. This was with a blue sky in the background, so who knows how high or what size it was, but it had to be big. It was basically the size of a quarter if you hold it out at an arm's length. So obviously fairly large. If it was more than a couple thousand feet up, it would have been, as my kids would say, ginormous. So like, what is that? What was that? I can't explain what it was to this day. The third one, and that's the extent of my slides, and sorry about the third one is very strange, and I think I mentioned to Joe and the location of it, and we were on a top secret mission I was over northeastern Africa at the time. So I was still on active duty. So this was 1983, early 1983, and we were on a top secret mission heading south and flying at 41,000 feet in a C-141 that we've already seen pictures of today. And we were over southwestern Egypt and heading south. So like the Sudan is in front of us, and Ethiopia is off to the left, and the Red Sea and Saudi Arabia and the Yemen countries, now they're just one, off to the west. And it is just like an hour before sunrise, and if you've ever been at high altitude or like over the ocean and before a sunrise or after sunset, you'll see the sky is like a rainbow color if you use some imagination. And we were able to, we could see a few dozen stars, and we're droning. We were on a mission from God. I can't tell you any rest of that, because that's even a longer story. But anyway, but this one little snippet of time, we're over southwestern Egypt, and we would describe it BF nowhere, where there's just Maasai warriors, and almost nobody below us has had any education. Nobody has, they have a loincloth and a stick, and they take care of goats. And if you look from the topography during the daytime, a different time, it looked like God had its way with the geography, the geology of the ground. It just what happened on the planet when this area was forming. But anyway, this was at night, about an hour before the sun is coming up, and we're looking out the window on this classified mission. We had 2 crews that were put together in Germany to go do this mission on short notice. So I had a co-pilot in the right seat, and I was in the left seat. I wasn't an aircraft commander yet. That's how I can timestamp this. Is 1983. So we're just, and one of the flight engineers was awake, and we're speedy heat going south for our real mission. And we're looking at the stars and seeing how beautiful the sunrise, the approaching sunrise is coming up, just gorgeous. And there's Venus up there, and my co-pilot didn't understand a lot about astrology and astronomy, rather. And I'm explaining, oh, that's Venus right there, and if you look, there's probably Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, depending on, So we're going along and staring at Venus, and I'm explaining Venus and my basic knowledge of astronomy, and we got all the lights in the cockpit turned down. And there's no radio work. It's on an HF radio, very quiet at that moment. And all of a sudden, there's another bright object that just appears, maybe about 10 degrees away from Venus, and it had not been there before. Just like suddenly it appears. And then my co-pilot goes, "Oh, what's that?" And I'm like, "Oh, we've been looking at Venus, on the just a few dozen stars that we can see at this point, because the sun's going to be coming up shortly. Nothing changed. The occasional little meteorite. You can see a lot of meteorites, especially if you were a few hours earlier before the sun's trying to come up in the Milky Way. This sudden bright object lights up. Once again, we're at 41,000 feet. And at the time, only certain special airplanes could get above that altitude. And we're driving south over the middle of BF nowhere. And all of a sudden, there's this other celestial light, 40 degrees up off the horizon. And I'm like, I can't explain that. I said, I think we're seeing a supernova, and it could be in another galaxy. And that's all I could say. But would it just suddenly come on to one intensity and stay at that intensity and not move? It's sitting there, and it says, well, it's not a meteorite, it's not a space station, it's not a satellite, because it's not moving. It's just right there, and it's almost the same as bright as the Venus was. Almost right now, last about a year we've been seeing Venus has it has been very bright. So there's this bright white light up there, And once again, all the little factors. We're at 41,000 feet, 7 miles up in the middle of nowhere, heading south, no lights on the ground. And we're looking at this thing for 5 or 10 minutes. And I'm just like, I can't explain it. We must be looking at it, supernova, and because I can't explain it. And all of a sudden, and the engineer, and we're all looking at it, all the 300 lights and the gauges in the airplane, we've got those completely turned on. I'm like, what in the heck is that? And all of a sudden, just like we see those unidentified objects suddenly just move. This thing that has not been moving for like 10 minutes, we just see it just shoot off up and away. Like if it was in the atmosphere, it just went from 0 to unbelievable speed. I don't know, 1 billion miles per hour in a blink. And all three of us see this at the same time. And so then the junior officer on every flight always kept the secrets. And we have these paper documents, and you can do uncode stuff and decode stuff, and I can't go into that, but we always had this big code book, and it was a pain because if you lost that, you'd be doing paperwork for about 3 years. So we had this code book, amongst other documents, and I told the first officer we need to do a service report. And a service report, I had to look it up because I forgot. It stands for Communications Instructions for Reporting Vital Intelligence Sightings. And I knew about this, and so I had my first co-pilot, military term. I said, okay, I need you to encode what we just saw, where we're at, and the basic details, and you come up with these little codes. I can't talk too much about it, and we can transmit this over HF radios where everybody on the planet can hear it, but it's in certain little code things that expire. So nobody's going to be able to figure this out unless they have this exact same code book with the same date time groups. So we encoded that, sent it to on a military HF stations. I think we bumped it all the way to Panama, the canal zone, and okay, here's a service report, and it's in code. And so like an hour later, we're sitting there listening to now 2 HF radios screeching in our ears on the way to our real mission, and we just get back the words acknowledged. And I'm like going, what? We just saw something. If it was terrestrial, this was, we just saw something in the middle of where some places it should not be. Like somebody had a ICBM at 100,000 feet, and suddenly its rocket engines took off, and it went from 0 to something that was incredibly important, especially that part of the planet. Like Ethiopia was a Soviet puppet at the time, and the Yemens, and not a good place. And like this would be a very important national intelligence thing, and all we got the word was acknowledged. And then the weeks after that, we're back here in Jersey. I never got a phone call. Hey, you need to come into the base to get debriefed by the intel officer. Nothing. I'm like, really? Like, they knew about it. They didn't care. They didn't want, okay. Giant red flag as far as I'm concerned. The fourth thing that, my fourth sighting, now I'm in an airliner, and this was about 5 years ago. I'm flying with a new first officer, and we're flying a 3 or 4 day trip, and we're going to Boston Logan Airport, and it's at night, and I'm playing like instructor, because every time you have a new first officer, even though that person might have 30,000 hours, if they're new in that seat on this airplane, they're not, it's a challenge. And also, if they're going into an airport they haven't gone into before. So we're coming into Boston Logan Airport, landing on 4 right, if you're familiar with the runways up there. So we're below 1,000 feet. It's very intense. As closer you get to the runway, you have 150 people on board. You're sitting in a $100 million machine that can take out a city block if it has a mishap. So it's very intense, and you want to land on the runway and not go into the water if you're familiar with that airport. So, so as we're coming down, I happen to look out the right side, and there's intersecting runways at Boston Logan. And I think they're 3 left and right. So they're almost perpendicular, but they're shorter runways. So we're below 1,000 feet, and I see 4 white lights coming in from our right. And something you learn in aviation, if you see something and it's in your windscreen and it's not moving, that means you're on a collision course. So these white lights appear to be like on a collision course with us, maybe just slightly off. And I'm thinking, okay, do we execute a go-around, which is a very violent maneuver in an airliner, and opportunity to screw something up or overspeed the airplane, redline it, redline the landing gear doors, the flaps, or something like that, best on altitude, or do we continue the approach? And I thought, well, I'm experienced on the airplane. I know how to stop the airplane. If this other airplane is landing on the 3-3 left or right, I'll be able to slam on the brakes and stop before we hit it. So I don't want to do a go-around. So we land, and as we're rolling out, I'm bringing a thrust out of reverse, and I just happened to mention to the first officer, did you see the other aircraft? And he goes, yeah. And so we're pulling off on the taxiway, and I said, yeah, I was thinking about going around. He goes, I saw it too, and I was thinking about the same thing. I said, what do we do? We're on a collision course with this airplane. And we both kind of thought, well, we got it under control. I think he thought that I could control it and not hit the other airplane. So we pull off the runway, and then I said, hey, ask the tower before we switch over to ground control. And I said, hey, what was going on with the other airplane? You know, a lot of big airports like at LaGuardia, we call it LaGarbage, Chicago, San Francisco, there's intersecting runways, and you'll see this all day long. Airplanes landing and taking off perpendicularly, and you're like, how do they never crash? The controllers are just geniuses, and they know how to do this, and they do it all day long, but not at Boston Logan. And this looked like it was too close. So I asked the first officer, you know, asked them what was going on with the other airplane, because it made me nervous, it made him nervous. No, by the way, we're looking through 2 big 3-inch thick panes of glass, not the same window. So we're both seeing these white lights that we thought was another airplane. And the tower goes, there wasn't no other airplane. And I actually stopped the airplane, and I said, have them confirm that. And it said, there was no other airplane. And as we're taxiing into our parking spot, I'm starting, more pieces are coming together now. I go, all the lights were white. Once again, airplanes have a navigation light. You know, they should have a green and red light. They should have red beacons. Most airplanes have 2. Most airplanes have flashing white strobe lights. This was just 4, I'm going to call them orbs, white orbs coming on a collision course with us. And once again, none of the other textbook things from an airplane or airship coming in. So I was like, what the heck was that? Never figured it out. And ground control said, oh, we didn't see any other airplane. I'm like, we both saw it independently through different panes of glass, and we were both concerned that we were going to crash into another airplane. More recent, this was probably about 3 years ago, and I'm kicking myself in the butt that I didn't stop the airplane, which would have pissed off ground control, and turn on my cell phone and take a picture. So we just landed at Houston Airport, Houston International, abbreviated IAH, and it's a fairly large airport. I don't know, 4 by 4 square miles of real estate down there outside of Houston. So we're taxiing in, and we're coming up. We're going to go from using Los Angeles airport terminology, the north complex to the south complex of the airport. So we're taxiing in, and I look off to the right. The first officer didn't see it, I don't know why, and I go, what's that? And we look out, and there's this seemingly large drone motionlessly hovering over the Northern Airline ramp at about 400 feet. And this is about the size of this, maybe 2/3 the size of this room is my guess. Once again, blue sky, I don't have any background. It's hard for me to figure out what the size of it is, because I have no, what's the word I'm looking for? Reference, I can't, so, compare it. fairly large, and looking up at it, and it was black, and it was either a V-shaped or an upside-down 7. It was just stationary at like 400 feet above the ramp, where there's all kind of airliners going for a whole mile of ramp of airplanes. And I asked the first officer, different first officer, I said, "Can you ask the ground control if they know if they know about that?" And he did, and there's this pause, and all we got back was "Roger." And I'm like going, so, and I didn't have the thing where you could just discern it, that it was not something weird, because it's through a lot of glass. So I couldn't, if it was making noise, I couldn't hear it. So, in the fact that air traffic control just responded after delay, "Roger." Like, they knew about it, but they're not going to comment about it. And there's a thing called an ATIS and a NOTAM. ATIS is Automatic Terminal Information Service, where information every hour, unless there's a change, they send us all the information about the airport, the barometric altimeter, the temperature, the winds, which runways are active, which runways are for takeoff, which ones are for landing, and any little weird things that are wrong with the airport, like these lights are out, or the ILS is out for this runway, or whatever. So there was nothing in there about a drone, a large drone, over the airport. And also on the NOTAMs, which is notices for airmen, there was nothing in there about a drone activity over the base. Watch out for it. You hit it, you're going to be in a statistic. Nothing. So, and I went, once again, I wish I would have taken the time, say, "Hey, ground, we're going to stop right here. I'm going to pull off on this ramp over here and stop." I would have been, the chief pilot would have been calling me the next day, like, "What'd you do that for?" But once again, with 150 people on board that are trying to make a connection. So I didn't do that, didn't think, because I would have had probably my first unidentified aerial phenomenal photograph on an actual phone, if I would have been able to get my Samsung to focus through the windshield. But I didn't do that. And incidentally, if somebody operates a drone, UAS, small UAS, whatever you want to call it, over an aviation airspace, there's all kind of protocols on Federal Aviation Regulation 107 that they have to notify people, get permission, and it can be, if they're going to operate it over one of the United States' busiest airports, I could see cumulative of 10 hours of permissions to get that done. And there would probably be an air traffic controller with the person with the remote control operating that drone. And then, so now the quest to finish up the mystery, I'm the former wing commander for the Civil Air Patrol for New Jersey for the last 4 years. I just stepped down back in July. And the Civil Air Patrol has the world's largest collection of drones, small UASs, maybe China, but we don't know that. But we have thousands of these things for all of our different missions: aerospace education, cadet programs, emergency services, operations, search and rescue, counter drug, counter small drone activities. The Air Force even buys us drones that we fly into military bases, and we play the bad guy, and they use their weapons, particle beam, microwave guns, whatever they use, flying nets, to take out these nice $10,000 drones that the taxpayers bought. But I have never seen a drone that's in a V shape, or like the shape of the number 7. And once again, it's hard to tell when you're looking at something from an angle and maybe a half mile away what shape it is. So I happen to have a lot of friends in the aerospace industry, and I've been asking questions. Does anybody make a drone that's in a V-shaped or like a 7? And I've had a couple people sort of under their breath saying, the Israeli military has some. And I'm going, okay, Israel, Houston, Texas. Why would these Israeli military drones, which may be top secret, why would they be over Houston, Texas, right in plain view, where there's potentially thousands of people that could see it? That doesn't make sense. If this was a real drone, terrestrially made, the people are probably in jail now because they violated innumerable federal aviation regulations by flying the drone that low over a giant airport that's very busy, that's landing 60 airplanes an hour and taking off 60 airplanes an hour, airliners. So they would be in a lot of trouble. So those are my sightings. I just want to share those with you. And I want to thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And I welcome to be at this very distinguished panel that I'm not qualified to be at. but I want to thank everybody. Thank you very much.